Welcome back. Now, today's social protection is recognized all over the world as a critical element of national development strategies. It is recognized as key to reaching vulnerable, often excluded sections of the population, thereby achieving inclusive, pro-poor, equitable development right there. So we are going to be having this conversation centered on the social assistance grants for empowerment, and if that 25,000 is really enough for the elderly in the country. So right now I have Patrick Katabazi. He's the public policy specialist, Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, and he joins me right now to talk about the social assistance grants for empowerment scheme, commonly known as SAGE, which initially piloted two types of direct income support grants, namely the Senior Citizens Grants and the Vulnerable Family Grants. He joins me right now. Very good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me, is this 25,000 Uganda shillings really enough at the end of the day?
Well, we have been debating about the adequacy of the 25,000 given by government, but I think we are moving past that stage now. But to answer your question directly, I think within the context in which it is provided, it is a very good starting point. I know for sure that there are quite a number of people in Uganda looking at our population statistics and the National Household Survey who find it extremely difficult to spend 20,000 shillings in a whole year. So extending 25,000, although I admit that it is still on the lower side, is a starting point for people who are living in extremely vulnerable situation, aware of the fact that 21.4% of population are living in extreme poverty. So it's a very significant contribution to such a family that is living in extreme poor conditions.
So is inclusivity working in Uganda's programs?
One of the reasons for having these social protection interventions is to bridge inequality that is growing every other day. Previously, we were told, and as an economist, this is what I studied through school, that if you allowed forces of demand and supply to play out, then you'll have income moving between individuals, and as such, people would easily fit in the equation. But what has progressively happened is that you're finding so many people becoming rich and then other people becoming extremely poor. So it is that state of affairs that requires another form of solution, which world over and under sustainable development goals, experts, public policy specialists, leaders all over the world have recognized that we need now special interventions to look at people who are extremely vulnerable. In Uganda's case, older persons contribute significantly to poverty numbers. Almost 80% of the older persons in Uganda are extremely poor and therefore extremely vulnerable. And I think that is the reason why interventions for social protections in Uganda started with that age category. Of course, there are so many other cases of vulnerability. We have disability, people with different levels of disability. We have children, we have youth. But in Uganda, it is generally recognized that extreme vulnerability and poverty is within the old age category.
And by 2050, the number is going to skyrocket to at least 5 million older persons living in Uganda here alone. Now, does government have the resources to cater for this number, the burgeoning number of elderly people?
Yes, the extending 25,000 to older persons in Uganda, in my view, is a stopgap measure. It is not to say that it's an end game, that you provide this money and that's all. We must be seen as a country trying to look ahead and providing, in my view, what we call sustainable social security, social protection solution. And that lies in what one would call pension reform in this country. So if you're providing this money, 25,000 per month, you are trying to cater for a group of persons who are not covered under any form of social security by nature of their circumstances. But remember now, in Uganda, we have the youngest population, actually all over the world. and you have over 65% of population below 30 years.
Indeed.
Yes, which then becomes a window of opportunity for Uganda regarding the issue of pension reform. So if you promote productivity within that age category in a very young population, just like it was for the Asian tigers, you're taking people to work, they are going to get an income. And when they do, if you have reformed your pension sector, then you catch that group that is accessing employment, and then they start contributing for their social security. So if you are contributing for your social security today, then there will be no need for you to benefit from programs such as this, because it is envisaged that by the time you retire, by the time you transition to old age, you already have some form of social protection. So what we are dealing with is a long history of inequality and lack of effective measures to ensure that you have social security that is guaranteed beyond those people who are working for government. So for me, I agree with you entirely that in the next so many years, the burden on government to provide support for these category of people will increase. But there's a solution. And the solution is in reforming the social security system.
Reforming the social security system, but still, to get to that, we need to empower the young people who are the youth, the 73% who make up the population right here in Uganda. So you did mention if we are to employ these young people, they would be the same young people who would provide for their retirement benefits at the end of the day. But then we are dealing with the issue of unemployment. Do you envisage that we are going to be headed for the same debacle that we are dealing with right now? Older people, because if we are saying young people right now have no jobs, and the only way that they can actually assure a brighter future is by getting into employment so that they could be assured some grants at the end of the day. So if we are still dealing with the unemployment, are we still dealing with the same problem at the end of the day? And an old population that is not empowered at all.
Yeah, that is a risk to our to the future of this country and other developing countries. So, but we need to start appreciating that social protection again is one of those interventions that can help reboot the economy in so many ways. So, what is social protection start with? We are talking about interventions, policies, programs, and actions that are looking at tackling issues of vulnerability and incapacity. That does not only extend to old age. So social protection envisages a life cycle approach. And what do I mean? I mean a cycle that is looking at young pregnant mothers, for instance. We can start it from there, from children, to young people, to working class, and then ultimately older persons when they have retired. So it therefore means that programs such as the Youth Livelihood Program, Women Entrepreneurship Program, are all social protection programs. Social protection in a sense that you're trying to create activities, create jobs, create avenues for making people productive. And once they are productive, then they become socially secure. So the correct investment for this country is to invest in a life cycle social protection approach, where you target children. So after targeting children, then you show that you have these children transiting into reasonable adults. And what do I mean? Statistics have indicated that a child's growth happened significantly in the first 1,000 days. Those are 3 years. So now once you cannot guarantee that within the first 3 years for a child, then you are going to have a child who will grow into an adult who will not be very competitive in the years to come. And stunted growth in Uganda and sub-Saharan Africa has been identified as one of the leading causes of low returns on investment, including on education, because if a child is stunted, then such a child cannot compete favorably within the education environment. So for me, ultimately, the deal is in extending social protection within the life cycle approach, creating skills for the young people, and the skills, of course, leading them to employment. Employment, of course, has a very strong connection with income, which then income must feed into something that is not there yet. Why am I saying so? If I am saving my money within NSSF right now. It means that when I click the qualifying age, 55, 60, I'll line up at NSSF, get my money back. When I get my money back, who then caters for my social security if I no longer have the money? A report from NSSF suggests that within a period of 6 months, people blow up.
Indeed, they blow up all the money. People have come out to tell stories.
So then after then, so if you're lucky to live up to 70, 80, and 90, who is going to be looking after you? So we need to start having a very honest debate
to
about
restructure this social security.
Yeah, social security, and then harnessing these programs that we have, youth livelihood program, women entrepreneurship program, to ensure that ultimately they achieve the objective, and the objective being building the capacity of people to earn, to participate in the market.
And in June of 2015, the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development did phase out the Vulnerable Family Grant. What were the ramifications of that on social protection?
Yes, first of all, it was a pilot phase. And being a pilot, a lot of things can happen in a pilot phase. It could be that the lesson that that they got from the pilot were not probably encouraging, or if they were, we need to also appreciate that there have been a competition for resources, and these pilot programs are ultimately, as you will see later in the discussion, are supposed to be owned by a government later on, and the issue of affordability becomes very pertinent. So you have two competing projects that were being piloted at the same time. You have the Senior Citizens Grant, you have the Vulnerable Family Grant. So at the end of the day, with the situation of resource constraint, are you going to push all of them together?
And some experts, because some experts contend that the Vulnerable Family Grant was more effective in that it was increasing family household incomes, and in that way, parents were in a better position to send their children to school if they get a very good education, better jobs, better employment. You're on the NSSF. You get my point. Yes. You're getting the grant. So if you're not actually increasing the household incomes in that regard, children will stay home, they won't go to school, they will stay unemployed, and if you've not restructured the social security plan to bring those unemployed into that fold, you'll be having a big problem. So do you think we should have the Vulnerable Family Grant back?
Yes, I think, yes, I think we need all other social protection interventions. But the research that you are talking about did highlight three important things. Number one, that older persons are taking care of 1.3 million vulnerable children in this country.
And we should be the other way around.
And how many older persons do we have in this country? According to the population statistics, people who are above 65 years are about 2 million. So they are taking care of so many vulnerable children.
And
most people in the urban centers, most people in urban centers, including me and you, quite often, when you have children and we get busy, we have a little bit of challenge, we send them where? We send them
to the
back,
villages.
to the villages.
To their judges.
And these are the people who are keeping fort. So now that relates to the Vulnerable Family Grant. So you already have a solution that is in this age category as well. But also more importantly, you realize that because of mobility that is rising, you have older persons who have been relegated to these villages as young people are coming to. So the same vulnerable households that you are talking about, definitely then that household has an older person in it. So in terms of striking a balance, and in face of limited resources, then you would find that the older person's grant is more preferred, because the same household that is vulnerable has an older person. The children that we are talking about are in the care of the older person. And research has indicated that this money, 25,000 that we are talking about, has had significant impact on education, because you know how older persons love their children and their grandchildren. On education, on health, improving nutrition, because if you have not eaten meat in a long time, and it is your payday, and you have received 25,000,
and meat is around 12,000 Uganda shillings.
Yes,
so at the end of the day,
sometimes you want a quota.
You would have blown up this whole money. And I'm grappling to understand, Mr. Katabazi.
Yes.
This money is paid out after every 2 months.
Yes.
Surely this is a joke in the current inflationary position of the country. Don't you think? 25,000, do you really think this money is enough? Don't you think it's a joke?
No, I don't think so.
Seriously, Katabazi,
yes,
in the current inflationary position this country is
yes, yes, in Kampala circles, in the urban, in the elite, yes, that's really not so much money because that's a day's meal. But in some of the places where I come from, in the deep villages of Kisoro, of Yumbe, of Karamoja, and indeed what has been demonstrated in various evaluation reports made by government and independent experts, this money is capable of turning around the economy. Because you see, you are not looking at the money paid to an...
How?
You are not looking at the money paid to an individual here. You are looking, for example, during the pilot phase, you would have about 60 million going to sub-county. So when you look at the structural flow of income, you realize that in that 25,000 paid to one individual, you have about 10 other direct and indirect beneficiaries. First of all, you're getting to the market somebody who previously did not have any means to get to the market. And in the market, you have businesses that were there and stuck because they do not have many consumers of their goods and services. So you have rebooted the economics of that very given community. But also, more importantly, you have provided basic income to this very person who in a year had no capacity to even get 10,000. But here you are, in 2 months, you have 50,000 that has come to your pocket. Because you're talking about which categories of people? We're talking about people who can no longer work. You are talking about people who can no longer access even government programs. So you can say that this is providing seeds and seedlings to the sub-county. This person cannot even have the means to get to that point. This person cannot even farm. But independent evaluation surveys have revealed very, very interesting statistics.
And another survey from the Oxford Policy Management did come out to say that the fact that the SAGE program has not significantly impacted areas beyond basic consumption. Yes, they believe this program has not impacted these areas beyond basic consumption. You give me this 25 years, like you said, I'll buy some meat, be able to buy some few edibles here and there. So according to the Oxford Policy Management report, they believe the SAGE program, Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment program, did not actually impact these areas beyond consumption, which means it's unlikely to be or prove to be transformative.
I would be interested in looking at that report because I work with Oxford Policy Management.
I will share with you after.
I work with Oxford Policy Management in many ways, and I don't think I have come across that very surprising statistic. But by and large, even if it has actually demonstrated that these people are using the money to consume, that would be ordinarily expected of an older person. Because what does an older person need? An older person needs a dignified life. And what constitutes a dignified life? Small amounts of money to buy salt, to buy soap, to
Is
buy
that the consumption that they're talking about?
To buy food. And by the way, once in a while, to even buy a beer.
But that's consumption.
Because yes, and you know consumption drives economic growth.
How?
Because if you have things on the stall in the market that are not being consumed, it means that goods are not fetching a price. And because goods are not fetching a price, the traders are not going to get any income. The traders are not going to pay tax. And because they cannot pay tax, then you have an economy that is sleeping. So consumption, consumer price index is driven by consumption. So now, if you cannot have consumption numbers going up or consumption potential up, then the economy is dead. And for me, to that very extent, even driving consumption at a local level, at a sub-county level, in my view, has very, very significant advantages. But by and large, for me, the question is, and has always been, if government of Uganda has invested in this program, is it investing enough? Is it providing?
That is the question. Are they investing enough, and is that money just enough to help the country transform the elderly people? Right now, they are consuming, but we want this SAGE program to be transformative, change the person as it is.
Yes, so a very comprehensive SAGE program would be extremely transformative. That's true. But for the purpose of this discussion, we are talking about just one very simple component of the senior citizens grant. And I strongly believe and agree with you in one or the other that the level of investment in the SAGE program is still very low. And because it is very low, we are likely not to get a higher return on investment. For instance, in the financial year 2020 that we are planning for, 2020-21, the budgetary requirement to cover the national rollout targeting all 80-year-old older persons is 142 billion, of which 108 billion is expected from government of Uganda and 34 billion is expected from development partners. But the National Budget Framework Paper does reveal a financing gap of 45.5 billion.
We're about to wrap up, Mr. Katabazi. I think we should just cut to the chase. The elderly people in this country have in the past called for social assistance grants for empowerment to be reduced from 80 to 70. Do you envisage that this will be the case, that it will be reduced from 80 to 70? Because in the past, your boss, the chairperson of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, Mr. Jacob Richards, did actually contend that the idea or the criterion to have people on this program at the age of 80 was just a discussion. It was just up for debate. Do you think this is still up for debate and we might have this age lowered to 70?
No, I think the debate was concluded in 2018. Parliament did pass a resolution that in view of very limited resources, let the program cover the entire country, but starting with the people above 8. With a roadmap, a 5-year roadmap, to progressively review the age with the aim of lowering it to 65, which is the benchmark age, which was the pilot phase in the first 15 districts in this country. So there is hope that when resources become available, and I hope resources will be available, that the age for benefiting from this scheme be lowered to 65, so that we implement what you call meaningful social protection for the older persons who are not captured anywhere within our pension program.
Mr. Katabazi, do you also advocate for our workers who are working in this country to be given their benefits even before clocking the retirement age, so that they can be able to use that money and verifiably put it in some ventures that can increase their income in that regard? Because at the end of the day, when they get this money, when they've retired, like you said, they blow it up in 6 months. Should a policy be put in place whereby they get this money earlier?
Yes, I have studied social security extensively, and I am not one of those people who believe that money for social security should be money for investment.
So what do we
do?
An example. So what do we do?
As an example.
Because they're blowing up the money at the end of the day.
Your saving with NSSF is 5%. You have 95% available to you. So if you have that very strong business acumen, then you can do any investment that you want with. So if you save for 20 years, for instance, and then you want this money to save, you want this money to do an investment, you are compromising your social security when you become old. So for me, the debate should be that we need social protection for all age categories, but as well as reform in the sector, so that the money we are contributing today can be able to sustainably help somebody who has retired. And 100% with 100% payment at hitting the qualifying age is not part of the solutions.
Public policy specialist Mr. Patrick Katabazi from the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. He's been talking to us on the issues to do with the social assistance grants for empowerment and how low that money is. But then he says it's too much and these people can actually work with that money. But he has also called for more to be allocated for the same. Patrick Katabazi, thank you for having made the time to speak to us.
The pleasure is mine.
It's been absolutely amazing. I didn't really on the budget, but then for another time.
Please, I'll be looking forward.
This is Morning at NTV. Yes, I'll be reading your birthdays in a bit.